Hey guys, welcome to the Vision Panorama podcast. I want to take this opportunity to invite you to come along this journey with me. I want you to do three very simple things for me. Things that will not cost you a penny, things that you will not have to break any sweat on, but at the same time will mean the world to me. First of all, I want you to subscribe to this channel if you've not done so yet. Secondly, I would like you to like the content. And last but not the least, I would like you to comment in the comment section. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to know your opinions because I genuinely want to know what you think about the things I talk about. And if you like the content, also do well to share. So come along with me on this journey. Let us do Vision Panorama together. Hello guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world and which time exactly you are watching this particular episode. Today's episode is going to be on the new EU law on migration within the European Union, but also outside of the EU. And you know, migration is a highly sensitive topic to talk about because you are talking about people that find themselves in vulnerable situations, and it's also a topic that cannot be exhausted in just one episode. It has so many facets and elements to it that we'll probably have to do a couple of series on this particular topic. Briefly, let me highlight a couple of things you can find in this new EU law on migration. First and foremost, the purpose of this law is to tighten the migration law with much more stricter border controls. And these stricter controls will mostly take place on the southern border countries of Europe. So we are talking about Spain, for example, Italy, Malta, Cyprus, because the majority of the refugees that comes to Europe come through these countries. So there are three important things I want you to note about this law. First of all, like I said, the purpose is to strengthen the border control on the southern borders. So practically, this is what it means. When refugees arrive on the southern border countries, what will happen is that the border authorities will check their identification, their biometrics, process their asylum case, and see if they meet the conditions to receive asylum to remain in Europe. If they don't meet these conditions, they are immediately sent back to where they came from. So they don't even get the opportunity to enter Europe. Second thing about this law is that there is also an element of solidarity and responsibility sharing. What this means is that for the people whose asylum cases will be accepted, this law is creating a solidarity system whereby these refugees that will be allowed to enter will be equally distributed amongst all the countries in the EU, so that no particular country or certain countries will be burdened. So let's say 100,000 refugees reach the border of Italy seeking asylum, and Italy processes all these 100,000 people, and based on the processing of their cases, they all met the requirements to receive asylum in Europe. Italy will not have to host the entire 100,000 refugees. What will happen is that they will be equally distributed amongst all the countries within the European Union. That is the idea behind it. But note that this is just an option. There is another option, which is instead of deciding as a country to take your fair share of these refugees, you can choose to offer financial support to the border countries that are dealing with the applications. So it's either you choose to receive your fair share or you offer them financial support, which means that you as a country in the EU, you will not have to host any of these refugees. So already if you think through this, you can see the possible problems that may arise from this. This law wants to intensify the amount of deportations. On the deportation, it is going to focus on the people that are already in the EU that do not have the legal permit to stay here. And this deportation is not just deportation to your country of origin or where you are coming from. According to this law, there is a possibility of being deported to a country where you are not from, a country you have absolutely no connection with. So, for example, a Congolese national can be deported to Bangladesh, even though he or she has no connection with Bangladesh. And this is how it's going to happen according to the law. And this is how it's going to go practically. countries within the European Union are allowed to make deals with other countries outside of the European Union and even outside of Europe, to whom they are going to deport some of these people. So when Belgium makes a deal with Bangladesh, for example, they can then deport people from Belgium to Bangladesh regardless of the nationalities these people carry. So in sum, this is what the new EU law on migration actually entails. So just take a minute and let it sink in, because this is wild. I have a question for you. We have a world population of about 8.3 billion people, right? My question is, out of this 8.3 billion people we have as a world population, what is the percentage of migrants? In other words, what do you think is the percentage of people in the world living outside of the countries in which they were born? What do you think? Take a guess. Take a wild guess. Do you think it's 20%? Do you think it's 30%? Do you think it's 40%, 50%, or even more than 50%? Do you know what the answer is? The answer is just 3.6%. Just 3.6% of the world population are migrants. And let's just look at Europe. Let's just focus on Europe. The European Union has 450 million citizens in total. How many of these 450 million citizens are refugees? The answer is just 20 million. Can you believe it? And it doesn't seem so, and that is because of the kind of information we are exposed to on the news, social media, all kinds of platforms. Everything is being blown out of proportion. It's as though we are being flooded with refugees and migrants, and we have absolutely no control over it. So these kinds of narrative has incited fear amongst so many people in Europe that has led to huge backlashes on migrants and refugees. And the question is, to what extent are these narratives rooted in reality? I just presented you the numbers, and so you realize that it is all about what people perceive, and these perceptions are created by these narratives. So at the end of the day, the truth does not matter. It is only what you perceive, because you act on what you perceive, and regardless of whether what you perceive is right or wrong, you act on it, and that becomes the reality. And so these narratives about we are being invaded, we are being flooded with migrants and refugees. Let's just put this whole refugee and migration topic into perspective. You know, people fleeing their countries, they flee their countries because of conflicts and wars and all kinds of things that are outside of their control. But if we look at the war-torn countries all over the world, in Africa, in the Middle East, what we realize is that the majority of these refugees end up staying in their neighboring countries and in their own regions because of the cultural proximity and the language. It is only a fraction of the refugee population that comes to Europe. So if you look at the wars that we have in the Middle East, the wars that we have in Africa, the countries that are hosting the majority of these refugees are the countries in the same region. So in the Middle East, for example, with all the wars and conflicts that has occurred in that region, majority have been hosted by countries like Lebanon and Jordan. If you look at the conflicts that is raging on the continent of Africa, the majority of the refugees are hosted within the neighboring countries of these countries at war. So we are talking about Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia. These are the countries that are hosting majority of the refugees. It is only a fraction of the refugees that eventually reach the borders of Europe. And these countries do not even have the financial capacities, they don't have the logistics, they don't have the right infrastructures to host these people properly like Europe will be able to do. Because Europe has the financial capacity, Europe has the logistics and the operational capacities, Europe has the infrastructures to host these refugees. But yet with the remnant or the fraction of refugees that are coming to Europe, Europe is like, oh my God, this is a huge migration crisis. We cannot do anything. Our capacities has been exhausted. Meanwhile, people with very little capacities, very little infrastructure, very little financial capabilities are hosting about 90% of these refugees in their regions. Europe can do way better. Europe can do way better. This whole narrative of a huge migration crisis in Europe and this and that is absolutely nonsense. Just let me know what you think about this new EU law on migration and my take on it. In one of my next episodes, we will look at the implementation of this and look at the likelihood of it actually working, because it is one thing to have something on paper, it is another to see it manifest in practice. This was it for today's episode. Like I said, let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.